Perth, a sunny and relaxed city in Western Australia, held a dark secret. Known for its beautiful beaches, friendly people, and laid-back lifestyle, Perth seemed like a paradise. But beneath this serene surface, something sinister was lurking, waiting to strike fear into the hearts of its residents. A dangerous person, a predator, was hiding there, ready to shatter the city's peace and become a part of Australia's darkest history. This individual was not just any criminal, he was a master of disguise, a chameleon who could blend into any environment, making him even more terrifying. His name was Eric Edgar Cooke, but people in Perth were terrified of him. Cooke was a man who led a double life, appearing as an ordinary citizen by day, but transforming into a ruthless predator by night. His ability to mask his true nature made him one of the most feared individuals in the city's history. They called him the Night Caller, a scary figure who hurt innocent people in the dark. The name itself sent shivers down the spines of Perth's residents. The Night Caller was not just a name, it was a symbol of the fear that gripped the city every night as darkness fell. From 1959 to 1963, Cooke scared the city, turning its happy spirit into fear. The once vibrant and carefree streets of Perth became places of anxiety and dread. People no longer felt safe in their own homes, and the community's sense of security was shattered. His crimes were random and brutal, hard to understand. Cooke's attacks were unpredictable, making it impossible for the police to anticipate his next move. Each crime scene was a grim reminder of his capacity for violence and his complete disregard for human life. He was like a chameleon, changing his ways with each attack, leaving behind a trail of terror and sadness. His ability to adapt and change his methods kept the authorities on their toes, and his victims were left in a state of perpetual fear, never knowing when or where he would strike next. His victims of all ages and backgrounds were unlucky enough to meet him. Cooke did not discriminate. His reign of terror affected everyone, from young children to the elderly. The community mourned the loss of each victim, and memorials were held to honor their memories. The only comfort, a sad one, was that catching Cooke would stop his reign of terror. The police worked tirelessly to bring him to justice, knowing that his capture was the only way to restore peace to the city. When Cooke was finally apprehended, there was a collective sigh of relief, but the damage had already been done. But the scars he left on Perth, both physical and emotional, would stay long after he was gone. The community was left to pick up the pieces, and the memories of Cooke's atrocities would haunt them for years to come. The emotional wounds were deep, and the healing process was slow and painful. Cooke's story reminds us that bad people can hide in plain sight, looking like everyone else. His ability to blend in with the community was a stark reminder that evil can exist anywhere, even in the most unsuspecting places. It was a lesson that Perth would never forget. This is the story of Eric Edgar Cooke, the Night Caller of Perth, a man whose name will always be remembered for fear and violence. His legacy is a dark chapter in the history of Perth, a reminder of the fragility of peace and the ever-present potential for darkness to emerge from the shadows. To understand how Eric Edgar Cooke became a monster, we have to look at his childhood. His early years were a crucible of pain and suffering, shaping the man he would become. It was a time of neglect, violence, and the beginning of his dark future. The environment he grew up in was harsh and unforgiving, a breeding ground for the darkness that would later consume him. Born in 1931, Cooke was the oldest of 3 children, living in a world with little love and lots of violence. His family struggled to make ends meet, and the constant stress only added to the tension in the household. His father, Vivian Cooke, was a mean alcoholic who hurt his family. Vivian's violent outbursts were unpredictable and terrifying, leaving the family in a constant state of fear. Young Eric, the oldest, suffered the most from his father's anger, enduring physical and emotional abuse that left deep, invisible scars. The beatings were frequent and severe, and the emotional torment was relentless. His mother, Christine, was a kinder person, but she couldn't protect her children from their father's rage. Despite her best efforts, Christine was often overwhelmed by the violence and chaos in their home. Eric also had a cleft palate and a hair lip, which made him a target for bullies. The other children were cruel, mocking his appearance and speech, adding to his sense of isolation and despair. The surgeries he had helped a little, but his speech was still different, making him feel alone. The medical procedures were painful and only partially successful, leaving him with a lingering sense of inadequacy. School wasn't any better. He had trouble learning and was called slow, but no one understood the turmoil inside him. The teachers were often impatient, and his classmates were merciless, compounding his feelings of worthlessness. Cooke's childhood was filled with anger and resentment, like a pot about to boil over with violence. The constant abuse and neglect he experienced at home and school created a simmering rage within him. It was during these early years that the seeds of his dark future were planted, growing from neglect, watered by abuse, and taking root in his developing mind. The combination of physical pain, emotional torment, and social isolation created a perfect storm, setting the stage for the tragic events that would unfold in his later life. Eric Edgar Cooke didn't become bad all at once. His descent into darkness was a gradual process, marked by a series of increasingly poor decisions that hinted at the monster he would eventually become. It happened slowly, with small bad choices that got worse over time, hinting at the monster he would become. Each misstep was a small stone in the path that led him further away from the light. From a young age, Cooke didn't care about rules or authority. He was often seen as a rebellious child, one who would rather defy than comply. His teachers and peers noticed his disregard for the norms that others followed. He showed this by stealing and vandalizing. These acts of defiance were his way of expressing his frustration and anger at a world he felt was against him. He stole small things at first, like toys, items that seemed insignificant but were the first steps in a long journey of crime. These small thefts were his way of testing the waters, seeing what he could get away with, but then started stealing bigger things as he felt bolder. With each successful theft, his confidence grew, and so did the scale of his crimes. He began to believe that he was invincible, that he could outsmart anyone, because he didn't get caught often. He thought he was above the law. This sense of invincibility only fueled his criminal activities, making him more daring and reckless. His crimes gave him a way to express his anger, to feel in control when he felt powerless. Each act of theft or vandalism was a way for him to reclaim a sense of power and control over his life. He enjoyed taking what wasn't his, feeling good about tricking people. The thrill of deception and the rush of adrenaline became addictive, pushing him to commit more and more audacious crimes. As he got older, his crimes became more serious, each one taking him further down a bad path. The stakes were higher and the consequences more severe, but this did not deter him. Even when the police caught him, it didn't stop him. Each arrest was just a temporary setback, a challenge to be overcome. He saw himself as smarter and more cunning than the authorities. He thought he was smarter than them. This arrogance blinded him to the reality of his situation, making him believe that he could continue his criminal activities without facing the consequences. He hid his true self, acting normal while planning his next crime. To the outside world, he appeared to be just another young man, but inside he was constantly plotting his next move. He kept falling deeper into darkness. Each crime was a step further into the abyss, a journey from which there seemed to be no return. The darkness consumed him, leaving behind a trail of pain and suffering. Terror grips Perth, the Nightcaller's spree. When everything feels chaotic, it's normal to feel scared and unsure. It's okay to feel overwhelmed when you don't know what's going to happen. Everyone feels doubt sometimes, but remember that these feelings are a normal part of life. Taking a deep breath and thinking about the next step can help you feel better. Remember, even when things are very dark, there's always a little bit of hope. Cooke acted calm and charming, fooling everyone around him. He was so good at pretending that even his close friends and family didn't see the badness inside him. This allowed him to continue his evil plans without anyone suspecting him. The case changed when something very important happened. A witness, who had been too scared to talk before, finally told what they saw. This brave person gave information that connected Cooke to the crime, showing everyone the truth behind his lies. The courtroom was full during the trial. Everyone wanted to see justice done. Cooke, who used to be so confident, started to fall apart as the evidence against him piled up. Surprisingly, he confessed to his crimes, maybe hoping for a less severe punishment, but his actions were too terrible. The jury quickly decided he was guilty. Cooke was sentenced to death and executed soon after, bringing some peace to the families of his victims. Even after Cooke was gone, the city still remembered his terrible crimes. The once peaceful community was now always on alert, changed forever by what had happened. Cooke's story is a dark reminder that bad people can hide behind friendly faces.